Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about something that's been on a lot of people's minds lately, interest rates. Now, you might be wondering, why should I care about what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates? Well, the truth is, these decisions have a huge impact on our daily lives, from the cost of borrowing money to the value of our savings. And right now, there's a big question floating around: is the Fed waiting too long to cut interest rates? Now, this might sound like a topic for economists or finance experts, but it's something that affects all of us, especially if you're managing a household budget, paying off debt, or depending on Social Security. You see, the decisions made by the Federal Reserve can influence everything from your mortgage rates to the interest on your credit cards, and even the economy as a whole. So, it's definitely worth paying attention to. Let's start by looking at what's happening right now. Recently, we got some pretty concerning news. The latest jobs report showed that the unemployment rate has ticked up to 4.3%, and the economy added fewer jobs than expected. This has a lot of people worried that we might be headed toward a recession. Normally, when the economy shows signs of slowing down like this, the Fed might cut interest rates to help stimulate growth. But, as of their last meeting, the Fed decided to keep rates steady. So, what does this mean for you and me? Well, higher interest rates can make it more expensive to borrow money, which might make you think twice about buying a car or taking out a loan for home improvements. It can also mean that businesses might cut back on hiring, which could make it harder for some people to find or keep a job. On the flip side, if the Fed decides to cut rates, borrowing could become cheaper, which might encourage spending and help keep the economy from slowing down too much. But here's the thing: some economists are now saying that the Fed might have waited too long to make that cut. If they don't act soon, we could see more job losses and even a recession. And if you're living on a fixed income, like Social Security, or trying to stretch your paycheck to cover rising costs, a recession can be particularly tough. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so why doesn't the Fed just cut rates now? That's a great question. It turns out the Fed is trying to avoid a mistake they made back in the 1970s and 80s. Back then, they raised interest rates to fight inflation, then cut them too quickly when inflation started to slow down. But inflation came back with a vengeance, which led to even higher rates and a lot of economic pain. So, the Fed is being very careful this time around, even though it might feel like they're moving a little too slow. Speaking of inflation, it's actually been cooling down quite a bit. But even with inflation coming under control, the Fed seems to be holding off on cutting rates just yet. This has left a lot of people wondering if they're being too cautious. If you're trying to make ends meet, this waiting game might feel frustrating, especially if you're seeing prices rise but not your income. And let's talk about what could happen next. The Fed has hinted that they might cut rates at their next meeting in September if things continue to slow down. Some people are even calling for an emergency rate cut before then, especially with the stock market taking a hit after that jobs report. But emergency cuts are rare, and some experts think it might actually cause more panic than good. It's kind of like being in a crowded theater. If someone yells fire and everyone rushes to the exits, it can cause more harm than the fire itself. So, the Fed has to be really careful about how they handle this. So, what should you do in the meantime? Well, it's always a good idea to keep an eye on your finances, especially in times like these. If you're carrying debt, think about paying it down faster if you can, especially high-interest debt like credit cards. And if you're looking to buy a home or refinance, you might want to consider locking in a rate now before things change. On top of that, it's a good time to review your budget, make sure you're saving where you can, and consider building up an emergency fund if you haven't already. Another thing to keep in mind is how this could impact your Social Security benefits or tax refunds. If the economy does slow down, there could be changes in how these benefits are adjusted, so it's important to stay informed. And if you have kids, be sure to take full advantage of any child tax credits available to you, as these can make a big difference in your budget. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources and communities out there to help you navigate these changes. Whether it's talking to a financial advisor, joining a support group, or just staying informed through trusted sources, there's plenty you can do to stay ahead of the curve. So, the Fed's decision-making process might seem distant or even a bit abstract, but the outcomes of those decisions are anything but. They touch our lives in very real ways, from the interest we pay on loans to the security we feel about our jobs and savings. While we can't control what the Fed does, we can control how we respond to it by staying informed, being proactive, and making smart financial decisions. So then, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And if you found this discussion helpful, don't forget to share it with someone who might benefit. Let's keep this conversation going and help each other navigate these uncertain times. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep taking care of your finances.